Afternoon, everyone, and we're going to turn off a little bit the lights so that you can see the slides that are much more important than I am. Leave it to a curator to throw a wrench in the whole proceedings, because I was thinking as everybody was speaking, I'm like, sometimes I don't want plastic to disappear, and instead it disappears on me. It kind of melts or pulverizes, and especially that pesky polyurethane foam of one amazing chair at the museum from 1964 that is at this point just like fading away. But the materials of design are, of course, one of the most important ingredients of the whole process, and also one of the most crucial, as we've heard today, for the whole day. And that's what I would like to talk with you about today. The very first show that I organized at the Museum of Modern Art, where I started my career, my New York career 29 years ago, was about materials. It was called Mutant Materials in Contemporary Design, because at that time it was all about materials performance, about how they could surprise you. It was about wood that was as soft as foam. It was about plastic that was as compelling and durable as marble. It was about this whole exchange of features and potential. And there were all these like wondrous materials. In particular, you see there the first aerogels that at that time were really an innovation. And they so captured everybody's imagination that the New York Times wrote that they were lighter than air, which of course they were not, otherwise they would be floating, but they felt that way. And everybody was like really marveling at all these different possibilities. And also it was an exhibition where you could touch most objects. So it really was about the brand new world and the daring of material designers. Still, there was not much of a consciousness of the problem of circularity and the life cycle of materials. So now, almost 30 years later, I'm preparing a new exhibition on the materials of design, but instead of being called mutant materials, it's called life cycles, because what we think about today is the whole life cycle of materials. We think about it from extraction to disposal or to reuse. We think about it in terms of how they perform. We think of embodied energy. We think of the energy that it took to take materials out of whatever source they were coming from. We think about all the implications of materials within their own life cycle and within the ecosystems that they encounter. And that's why it will be a completely different show, even though it will still be about this important part of the design process. You're looking here at the work of Forma Fantasma. Forma Fantasma are two wonderful designers, Italians trained in the Netherlands, and some of the most important prophets for the younger generation of designers, because everything that they do is impeccably elegant and gorgeous from a design standpoint, but it also has deep ethical and economical roots. They always think of how to make life and how to make design more sustainable, more responsible, without ever sacrificing the beauty and the elegance that we all want and expect from it. In this particular project that was part of an exhibition that I did in Milan in 2018, the 22nd Triennale of Design of Milan, they worked on the electronic waste issue by making these gorgeous electronic waste-made pieces of furniture that would attract everybody's eyes and would then lead people to watch videos where the people that actually investigate the underbelly of the blight that is the e-waste ecosystem in the world would talk about what electronic waste really means for the world. This will be part of Life Cycle, as will be many other objects that are part of MoMA's collection. You see here, for instance, we talked about mycelium. Mushroom mycelium is one of the heroes of contemporary materials. We've seen it as packaging, but it also becomes bricks with which we also erected a tower in PS1 at MoMA a few years ago, and also materials that are made with algae, just by recycling algae. You see that beautiful, I have a laser, wait a second so I can use it. You see that beautiful object there is called Okinaganode, and it's a structure that's all made of algae, and that has been existing for several years, showing how these materials are not just one-off, one-hit wonders, but rather they are durable and tenable. So you can fix it with new algae whenever necessary. It changes color. It lives with you. So we're already having a chance to really look at a longer life cycle of these materials, not just one demo, but to see also how they perform in time. So this is the entrance of Broken Nature. Broken Nature was a great exhibition for me because it gave me a chance to work in my city, which is Milan. It gave me a chance to work in the building where I started my whole career, which is the Triennale. And it gave me a chance to do exactly what I told you about, to try and have an exhibition for the citizens of Milan, because Milanese love design, so I knew they would flock to the exhibition, and to make it so that everybody could have an idea of what they could do in their own lives to be more sustainable, more responsible, without abdicating beauty and pleasure. So that was really the goal of the exhibition. It was an exhibition for citizens. I like how also Cyril was trying to grapple with these words, consumer, user. I always go for citizens, even though it's a little bit Tavareshish, it's a little strong. But I believe that the idea of citizens and how they live life is what we should focus on. Broken Nature was based on the idea that we will become extinct at some point, for sure. We don't have control over the fact. We have some control over the when and a lot of control on the how. So we might as well design a good extinction so that the next species that will dominate will not remember us as complete morons. So it was about that idea, let's do it well. And it was an exhibition that showed the long time that we need to think of if we want to really have some responsibility. And it showed with beautiful works also the ways in which we could think of the future. Of course, the Sustainable Development Goals are in everybody's minds, but it's really hard to look at them like this and to explain them to citizens without having some demonstrations. And I like to say that design is what makes revolutions, whether they're scientific, technological, or political revolutions, into life, because it transforms concepts that are happening into everyday objects that people can use. And that's in a way also what that exhibition aimed to do. It aimed to give many different strategies that people can use in their lives to be more responsible and more sustainable. I agree with Cyril, recycling is good. And so is co-creation with nature. And so is the idea of using new materials as if they were old ones, slowing down fast fashion or slowing down fast design. But also, it's not only about saving energy, but also designing with energy. It's not only about reducing pollution, but it's also about harnessing pollution. You've seen what Forma Fantasma do with trash. They consider trash not waste, but rather a new materials. And so on and so forth. There are many different ways to be responsible. It's not only about doing the one thing that we're told, recycling and reusing. There's so much more. And that's what the exhibition was about. Well, the SDG graphics that you've seen before were retaken, reinterpreted, and also made much more granular by Anna Kulacek, a wonderful Ukrainian designer that did all these different icons for us that showed all these different possible strategies. And then in the exhibition were different ways to demonstrate what we're discussing. Pretty much like the narration that Cyril made of the albatross bringing food back to its chickens, there were ways to show how the fossils from the future will incorporate plastics, how the world will be forever changed by plastics and plastics will not go away. There were some examples of art by various designers, as were examples of co-creation. Some of you might be already familiar with the work of Neri Oxman. She has been for a long time working with nature, trying to really co-create. And one of her projects that I like the most, it was also at the Museum of Modern Art in an exhibition that happened in 2020 that 5 people saw because it opened February 25th, 2020. But she's been able to work with silkworms, understanding how silkworms fabricate and making sure that they would be in the best conditions possible from our anthropocentric viewpoint. But she was trying her best to work together and create these different structures that were made by the silkworms and therefore were made according to the life cycles of nature. Another example of work that was at the Triennale in Milan and that now is also part of the MoMA collection is from an institution that I admire greatly. That's the Luma Foundation in Arles. You will know it probably because of the Frank Gehry building. It's a collection of art, but it also has an arm that is all about studying materials. And this particular arm has been devoting itself, it's Jan Bolen that runs it with a great team, to try and go to different parts of the world and showing people the work that they can produce using the waste that is available in that particular place. And you know, algae are a byproduct of our pollution. The phosphates that have been thrown into all the bodies of water have made algae proliferate. So this program was about going around the world and teaching people how to transform these algae into bioplastics that could then be used to 3D print vessels and objects from the material culture. And algae is only one of the materials that Luma tackled. At the most recent Furniture Fair of Milan, I don't know how many of you have seen their wonderful installation in which they were also making, for instance, handles, door handles made of salt. You know, salt is a natural bactericide, so the idea of having a handle made of salt incorporates in one object, in one material, also some functions that we've come to require of objects after the pandemic. So fabulous work. There's much more than that, columns of salt and other possibilities of biomaterials. Going back to the Triennale, you see also the work of Julia Lohmann, that Okinaganode made of seaweed. And it's funny because I realize now, I've shown you an exhibition from '95, and I'm talking to you about other exhibitions that I've done. It's always the same movie. You know how they say that a director always makes the same movie? I realize that it's an obsession that I've had throughout my life as an architectural training really taught me that there are goals and means, and the means at your disposal are the ones that also help you obtain and redesign the goals. So if today we're redesigning our goals to be more sustainable, more responsible, more economical, then the means also have to be redesigned. And that's why materials are so important to us. And now we go to the exhibition that I'm preparing, Life Cycles. Some of the objects from the Triennale have flown into the MoMA collection. You see here some examples, for instance, Arima Kosuke Araki, which puts together Japanese lacquer with food waste and makes it into new vessels. Or Carolina's Lotte damaged goods. She goes around and picks all of these plastic or ceramic debris, you know, the plates and dishes and cups from the trash and makes them into new works of art. These have flown into the collection and will be part of the Life Cycles exhibition, as will be the work of Fernando Laposse, Totomostle, which is a series of projects that have been done in his native Mexico to use all the different parts of corn, of maize, also the stalks, in order to make this kind of marquetry material. But the interesting thing is, and this is how we go even further into the idea of life cycle, is that by creating this community-based program to make a new material, Fernando has also helped stimulate the reintroduction of some heritage corn that had been wiped away by NAFTA, which is the North American Free Trade Agreement that brought so much of US-based corn into Mexico, wiping out all the memory and the diversity of corn before. And you can see how much I'm telling you, because we're working in systems, everything is connected. So by thinking of materials a different way, we can also influence the culture, and by thinking of traditions and local cultures, we can come to new realizations and new wisdoms about the materials that we now need to use in the future. So that's what makes me so happy, is to see how everything really comes together, and materials contain memory. Other objects that will be in life cycles are, for instance, these baskets from 2006 that Aranda Lash, two architects that are based here in New York and in Arizona, commissioned out of Terrell Dew Johnson, a Native American basket weaver, to understand how also other materials could be used architecturally. So I'm talking about this memory of materials and this memory of structure. as will be the work of Revital Cohen and Tur van Balen, who in 2017 made this fake diamond that comes from the tusks of elephants that were burned in Kenya when the police tried to curb the illegal killings of elephants and the poaching. So this idea of incorporating all life cycles in materials, as does also the idea of looking at materials that are just around you. There's this Gandhian, Mahatma Gandhi's idea that you should build a house only with the materials that can be found within a 5-mile radius from your home. Well, it's done also in design. And as I was in Singapore last year, I saw the work of this Indonesian designer, Adi Nugraha, who uses what is very amply available in the island in Indonesia where he lives, which is cow dung, and just cleans it without mixing it with any resins and makes it into these beautiful casings for loudspeakers and for lamps. But the real Gandhian predict is the one that is applied by Vinu Daniel. Vinu Daniel is an architect in Kerala, in India, that really applies this strict understanding of the Gandhian idea and really builds with whatever he can find within a 5-mile radius. And if that's mud or waste or trash, he builds with that. His company is called Wall Makers because that's how he started. He started by building a wall, and he relies a lot on local craftsmanship and local tradition and the bricklayers that he can find in the locations where he works. It's very important to look at all types of design and to understand that materials are not only plastics or other physical materials, but sometimes also immaterial ones. And that's what we're trying to do with Design Emergency. Design Emergency, actually Vinu is somebody that we found for Design Emergency, is a platform that I founded in 2020 with my beloved friend Alice Rossthorn, who's a really great design critic. We founded it because we were looking at COVID. We were stuck at home, we were in lockdown, and so we decided, what can we do? And my husband kept on looking at watching Fat Joe at night, and Fat Joe was doing, the hip hop artist was doing this Instagram lives with people. So he told us, why don't you do something like that? And off we were to the races. And we started interviewing designers that were actually having a very practical involvement in the pandemic. For instance, we interviewed the woman that at the Center for Disease Control was one of the 2 illustrators that made the official branding of COVID, because COVID looks like that blob, that gray blob with little dots around it. They made it into that Hellraiser deep water mine. So we started interviewing these people, but then as the pandemic was not really ebbing, but at least changing a little bit its course, we moved on to making the world a better place and just being more responsible. So we interviewed Vinu, for instance, or Xu Tiantian, who's this great architect in Shanghai, in Beijing, who with her company DNA is working with communities within a particular area in China that has 400 small villages, and in each village she's doing just what's necessary. So it's the same sense of the 5-mile radius, but instead of being only about materials, it's also about goals and needs. And in one of her most famous projects that you might have seen is that bamboo theater, in which the architectural gestures was just to take the bamboo that was already there and bend it to form a canopy that would create this kind of public space. So you see the economy and the elegance that comes with a different attitude towards design does not translate into poverty of form or into this kind of atonement that came a few years ago with the idea of being sustainable, right? It's not at all that way. It's just a new way of thinking about the richness and the beauty of design. And it can be even manifested in a project like the Great Green Wall of Africa, which is a project that involves 21 different countries in Africa and goes from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Indian Ocean. And it's an attempt to build a ribbon of greenery at the southern edge of the Sahel Desert to kind of rebalance what has been lost with so much of the deforestation in the Amazon basin. It is an epic project. It's actually happening, and it's very slow, of course. Each one of the 21 countries is using this the means at their disposal and their own tradition to build this ribbon. And it's only by beginning that we can try and get somewhere. So it really is a different mental form that is needed. And I feel that it starts with the packaging and the wrapping, and it ends with the Great Green Wall and beyond. I just came back last night from the Biennale of Architecture, and it's really interesting to see how much materials mattered. It's a really epic biennale. I hope that many of you will be able to go and see it. It's called Laboratory for the Future. It's curated by Leslie Locco, who you can see in this picture. And it focuses on Africa and the African diaspora, but it uses that as a way to talk about a new mental form that is based on very ancient traditions in some cases, that is based on considering the soul of objects and the soul of materials. And in this case, you're looking at Leslie standing in front of Gloria Cabral and Sami Bartoji, and Gloria is from Spain, so I was telling you it's from all over the world, that had tried to make this wall using all sorts of waste that they had found on the beach and in other discharges near Barcelona. So you see that even in that case, it's really about remaking objects and also working with native population, with First Nations and First people to try and make things the way they were done once upon a time, and therefore making them more part of the life cycle of a nation. Other examples in the Triennale, you see here Ana Maria Duran Calisto and the Association of Guarani Women from South America, and Kate Otten Architects and Threads from South Africa, working with women that knew how to thread and knew how to sew these particular examples of design and architecture. I also loved very much this Biennale because it was about building. It was about building communities, building new cultures, and not about buildings. You know, it was not about the usual way in which we consider architecture. And the national pavilions were also all about material. The German pavilion was about the idea that every time there's a biennale, so much of the work gets thrown away and the materials. So it was almost this accumulation of stuff that represented what had been thrown away in the previous biennale. And by the way, I have to say, Leslie Locco intelligently reused the installation from the previous biennale, which I thought was a declaration of intent unto itself. And on the right-hand side, you see the US pavilion, which was devoted to plastics. Interesting. I'm not sure, having studied plastics for my whole career, I'm not sure that it sent the rightest message, because it was still making plastic into a precious material, or maybe it did, because sometimes plastic can be precious, can be beautiful. It was a different transformation and transmogrification of plastic. I still have to think about it also because I'm jet lagged as can be, but it was definitely interesting, and it's one more proof about this the importance of this matter. And this was a beautiful installation by Serge Atouquet-Clotet that was all made. It's a little bit like, Jet Lag, the great Nigerian artist that makes these beautiful installations that are all made of trash. You know him. It's gonna come to me. But anyway, it's almost like an interpretation of that same diktat. So all made with waste. No, not Bibi Sek, artist, not design, not my friend, not our friend, the designer Bibi Sek. I'm talking about the artist that does gigantic. Yes, Elana Tsui, thank you. I knew it would come, thank you. In the end, it is about memory, it is about life cycles, it is about materials considered not simply as plastics and wood, but the materials of our existence. And I want to close with a very important and almost emblematic project, which is the Freshkill redevelopment in Staten Island, the Park of Freshkill. So Freshkill was a gigantic waste site, a dump site for decades, where the whole of New York and surroundings would send all their trash with barges. And it was just this gigantic discharge that was closed at some point in the late 90s and then was reopened opened after 9/11 to host all of the, not only building, but also bodily remains of the victims of the 9/11 attacks. So you can imagine a site that is at the same time disgusting and then becomes holy and becomes filled with all these souls of people and with all these like remains of a city. And that was then transformed into what is today Fresh Kills, the park, by James Corner and Field Operations. It's a long time project that is only now in its first phase. But in a way, instead of talking about bottles and chairs, I wanted to close with a place that is about memory and about life cycles and about the way we should think about all materials, all objects, and also all ecosystems. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Please stick around though, because we're going to have a Q&A session here. I think we're going to try to turn the lights up.
Okay.
But please stick around, and I think we do have some panelists here as well. And we have a good amount of time for Q&A now. So get in there, people. You know you have questions. Well, other people are going to hang around. Do you want friends? People can come up and join you if you want. Yeah. You can
I'm just going to go a little more central
then. You stay there. That
stay
sounds
here.
fine. And then there are some people walking around with microphones. So please raise your hand with your questions.
Yeah. There's a lady over here.
I'm going to give you my mic.
Thank you very much. And yeah, my question is for you and also for all the panelists today. And I was so impressed by everything that was said today. I am truly thankful. I work for a design studio that focuses on the human side of the sustainability challenge, so service design, business design. And one of the big tensions that I'm seeing right now is that on the one hand, we're saying sustainability should be in the background. We should make it easy for people and refocus on what their fundamental needs are and not use the S word. But on the other hand, we want to foster collaboration and we want to empower people with like having a critical lens on their actions. So I'm just wondering, like, what are your thoughts on this question and maybe rethinking the concept of education that can sound a bit patronizing sometimes.
Do you want to start? Please?
Okay.
But come here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Come and sit with you.
Yeah.
That was so
Thank
amazing. Yeah. I'm a big fan.
Thank you.
I love that question because I live in a world where we still have the likes of Coca-Cola saying, if only we could educate the consumer to pop it in the right bin, as if there is a recycling infrastructure that is ever going to pick it up, particularly in most of the developing world, let's be honest. And I see it really simply. I don't think it's their problem. So when we talk about sustainability and responsibility, and we constantly offset the blame to the shopper, that for me is fundamentally wrong. People buy what they're sold. It's industry's job to sell them something different. It's government's job. Yeah, it's so simple to me. It's government's job to mandate the industry do it faster. It's super simple. And the more that we deflect responsibility onto the people that buy our products, when we simply breed them to be consumers from the minute that they're born, is fundamentally wrong. It is not my responsibility. Why is it legal to sell us the wrong thing now we know what we know? That should be the question we ask.
I agree with you. And I also think that education can happen, but reversed. So I remember when I was a teenager growing up in Italy, and I found out that in Germany, German so-called consumers, but now they're really citizens, would boycott a US-made soap by a cosmetics company because the soap was covered in aluminum, put in corrugated cardboard within a tunnel and a tray of plastic, then the plastic in a paper box, and then a wrapping of plastic around the box. And they had, I mean, we're talking about probably the late 70s, early 80s, and German citizens were rejecting that and really boycotting. So the education can come from the people. And I have to say that the aim is not really I'm a curator and I'm not an entrepreneur, so it might be completely different. But the aim is to normalize a sustainable attitude, so you don't have to talk about it anymore. But until that is normal, we cannot really go anywhere. And you're right, there's no infrastructure. I always cringe about the fact that every time I throw away a piece of plastic, I'm not sure it's going to be recycled. And at MOMA, we have a sustainability effort. We don't know if after things leave MOMA, they're going to be recycled. But we go through the dance of having all the different bins because we want to normalize that kind of behavior. So you start where you can, but I agree with you. Those who can have a big impact on companies should do so.
And then designers have an incredible influence because exactly as everybody has been saying here, if we make the right option look incredibly cool and desirable, that's the best thing that we could ever do.
Panelists that are still here that would like to join up on the stage, if you're like one of those people that really loves the stage, now's your moment to come back, because I think it's hard to tell actually who's here and wants to participate in answering the questions. So please jump up if you want to. Okay, no one wants to. That's fine. All you.
I guess I'll try to speak loud. I don't know if you can hear me.
We hear you.
Okay, perfect. As far as MoMA doing an LCA on kind of like with artists on like the beauty industry and the formulations of the beauty products, because there is plastic in the actual like creams and stuff like that. There's like microplastics in beauty products. So I think it would be interesting potentially if that would be kind of like if you're doing an LCM like or with artists on e-waste.
What is an LCA?
It's just like the life cycle of. You do the life
Sorry, I
cycle.
didn't know about that. Okay, good.
Yeah,
LCA.
but what you were showing, it would be interesting to cover materials in creams and stuff because people don't know about that stuff. You know that there's plastics in their beauty products.
Yeah,
Besides the
it would
packaging.
be. Yeah, definitely. I don't have the opportunity to do it within this exhibition,
Yeah.
but it's definitely something that should be done.
It's a great provocation, actually, because you're right. 98% of all personal care, shower gels, conditioners, everything that we use in the shower, skin care products we put on our skin, 98% of them contain plastics. Nobody knows. We all think microplastics, it's the little scrubby bits to make our hands a bit cleaner once I've been gardening. That's not microplastics. I know, I ran a skincare brand for 11 years, so I know.
Oh my God, you did? Yeah. So there you go.
So I absolutely know the acrylates, the thickeners, the things that give it a nice feel on your skin, they are all plastics. But we can create formulas without plastics. The mandates are coming, and again, they will come through the EU. They'll start there first, because all of these are just washed down the plug hole, straight into our waterways, into our soil, into our oceans. Not regulated. I mean, I talk to skincare brands. I sit on the British Beauty Council Sustainability Advisory. People who run those brands don't even know that there is plastic in their products because they've got clever little names. I mean, it's just how it is. But it will be regulated, and it'll happen fast.
Now we know what she's atoning for. She fessed up.
I told you, I'm a big plastic sinner sitting here.
Now we know. All right. Another question. Okay. I have an extra mic. I'm going to see if this works.
Thanks. Oh.
Just keep talking. I feel like it'll just come. It'll come.
Of plastic-free or zero plastic solutions and also appreciators of good design. Are there any packaging solutions that you've seen recently that you find compete with good design, traditional good design that you've seen across industry in the past, especially as a MoMA curator? I'm curious if you have any favorites or standouts that compete with elegance and
You know, it's so hard to say, but I have many different bits and pieces. Like the innovative packaging is in the MoMA collection, and it's great, I'm sure. I wish we didn't have to use it at all, but I think it's going to be hard to do that. But for instance, I am for the old glass bottle that you refill. Like, you know, in the country place where we have a home in Italy, near the Lake of Como, there's a dispenser, milk dispenser. You go with the bottle and it dispenses you milk, you know, skimmed or not, et cetera, et cetera. So that, to me, that always makes me feel good. It's a little bit of a pain to go with but it's all right. It's well done. Or the old good paper bag, you know, the foldable paper bag, also in the MoMA collection. That's also great. I know that it doesn't fulfill all kind of safety, security, and regulations. So there's a lot of issues that are happening. And once again, it's a system. I don't know if we could find a way to have safety at home, so you bring things at home and then you clean them there. It would be great, but unfortunately, in a tort law situation especially, it's difficult. What about you? Have you seen?
Apart from some of the new materials that we feature on Plastic Free, which make me really excited because they are available commercially at scale, and nobody needs something that's just theoretical in a lab. Molded fiber, I think, is going to be a massive part of the future solution. Perhaps treeless fiber as well. It doesn't all have to come from trees. Agri-waste, all of those things. There's a company called Natural Fiber Welding. If you haven't heard of NFW, please check them out. Massively pioneering. Just launched the first completely nutrient-based sneaker. And you know, we'll talk about carbon footprints. The sneaker industry alone is 1.4% of our entire global carbon budget. To put them in perspective, aviation is 2.5%. And we all talk about flights and feel guilty. Nobody talks about sneakers. So those companies, I think, are amazing. But to give you a little bit of hope, because I love what you were saying about the whole going back a little to go forward, reusables will be the solutions. Reusable packaging is going to be the ultimate goal. There is no one, I bet in this room, if I said to you all, hands up if you don't think standardized, reusable packaging across competitive brands, like, you know, a 250ml bottle is the same in every company that uses a 250ml bottle, that goes into a fully circular system where it is collected, washed, and redistributed to the company that now needs the packaging. Could that be a solution that you think could work? Anybody disagree with that? Great. And we all think it's and every department, Unilever, P&G, L'Oreal, every single company agree it makes sense. Why are we asking the customer to spend 60% of the cost of goods to be complicit in the plastic problem by buying the packaging and putting it in the bin? So nobody wants that anymore. We want permanent packaging. We want things that have a weight, a resonance, a quality in our hand that can go back into this fully circular system. The good news is that this is not a pilot, I hate that word, but this is actually a big initiative kicking off in the UK. Competitive, massive brands like Unilever and P&G or L'Oreal coming together to agree to use standardized permanent packaging using glass, particularly metal, because of its resilience in that supply chain. It's going to happen. So there is a fantastic quote which is all about the pace of change. And it's never been this fast, and yet today it will never be this slow again, which I love, because I think that pace, like technology, like every revolution, the pace is going to happen so fast now. And that day is not too far in the future where we will open our kitchen cupboards and our bathroom cabinets and think, why was it ever okay for us to have all that single-use plastic shit that actually was pretty down-marketed and horrible, when everything is beautiful and everything has that resonance and that permanence in our hand? That day is coming super fast.
That's great. Okay, one more.
We have one over here.
Thank you.
I'll go in the back.
Okay. I can't tell if I got chills or it got colder in here. I guess my question is do you consider yourselves systems thinkers? And then my second question is, when does the exhibit formally open?
So the exhibition formally opens September 2nd. And I definitely think I definitely make the effort, and I think I'm a system thinker, but if I am not yet or all the time, I strive to.
Yeah.
No exhibition, but
Yeah, no exhibition, but I think, you know, on our platform, the first thing we ask designers to think about is how do you change the system, not just the product, not just the packaging. It has to be that, because single use is the problem. And so we can't just fix it with this band-aid of a slightly less bad use of a material that still goes into a waste system. We humans produce 6 billion tons of waste every single year. That's our gift back to nature. We can't do that any longer. And the eradication of single use will have a massive impact on the climate crisis too.
Hi, permanent packaging, that's the first time I'm hearing that phrase. Is there a link, more information on that? Is that something you coined, or is it an idea that's been floating around? I think it's fascinating.
I guess you just say it because we think in such a temporal terms. I mean, packaging it's ridiculous when you think about it, because I'm not buying the packaging, I'm buying the thing inside the packaging. But how quickly it's happened that yesterday, you referred to that German soap brand, yesterday packaging equals luxury. Today, packaging equals waste. Yeah. That has happened in a nanosecond.
Hi. I'm actually German, so I grew up, as you described, where it's very second nature for us to recycle. And when I moved to the US, I was actually shocked how different it is here. And I think it's also a little bit like the people here are very affluent, so we think about this, and this is like second nature to us. But I wonder if you have any thoughts on how to change the DNA for people that have other problems in their lives. And for them it's like thinking about food, how to get food rather than like about the packaging, which the reason why I'm asking is because my design agency actually does a lot of work with like nonprofits that try to bring change to development countries. And even though they're the most affected, like how it's not the first thing on their mind, like other things are on their mind. But I wonder also in context of the exhibit, how to like make people that are not aware of this aware of it. And I'm sure that the exhibit is one part of it, but I would love to hear some ideas.
Well, I believe that so-called developing countries are sometimes much more developed than us in terms of that. I agree with you that we need to think differently. And when you talk about the difference between affluent, non-affluent, I think more of the problem of food, for instance, here in the United States, where it is much easier to survive with very little money, with bad fast food, than it is with fresh produce. So that is definitely a problem when it comes to food. But in developing countries, that's where you see everything being used and nothing being thrown away. And if it's not really the recycle done by the state, it's the recycle done by the individuals. I also, it's difficult to generalize, but I believe that it really is a matter of culture, and culture doesn't flow all over the world in the same way, doesn't flow all in one direction. There's turbulences. So it's hard for me to think about it in general terms. All I can say is that I remember when Fernando and Humberto Campana, that are these two Brazilian designers, were taking me around Sao Paulo and showing me what happens in many different countries, that somebody takes pictures of the kind of like local wisdom of reusing things in very ingenious ways. But they were just showing so much of what they were seeing and digesting it into the way they did their design. I believe that there's a lot to learn from countries that we call developing, but that in reality show us how not very developed we are.
I completely agree, because you look at some of those that we call developing nations, and their understanding of how to work with nature, not against her, is phenomenal. And that's what we need to relearn. We are completely disconnected from nature now. We think we can control the weather. It's ridiculous, the things that we think. We think we're so superior and we are separate from nature. We are nature. We come from nature. And it is from indigenous communities that we can relearn how we have to plug back into nature, be in her slipstream, her circularity, because otherwise we will not have a livable planet. And we think we're above that. I mean, when you hear about Jeff Bezos wanting to do, let's take all the pollutive industries and put them out into space, it's just, or maybe we just work with nature.
But I'm not super happy with the answer I gave you. It's much more complex, so to be continued. Yeah.
All right, I think we're going to wrap it up for the day. I want to first of all give one huge round of applause to all of the panelists who are still here. Really, really well done. I, for one, am incredibly inspired by this afternoon, and I'm pleased that I was able to join you this afternoon. I also want to give a very special shout out to Jess McFarlane, who actually organized everything. So one more round of applause for Jess. And there's just one more thing I'll say, and then we're all going to go to the bar, which is, when we were first talking about this afternoon, we said, you know, there's so many panels out there. We have panel fatigue. You know, people just sit around and talk, and oftentimes they're talking to people that already believe in the thing that they're saying, so they're kind of talking to themselves. How is this afternoon going to be different? And I was like, I don't know. I'll try to make it funny, I guess. I don't know. That's one thing. But the other thing is, you know, we wanted you guys, each of you, to walk away from today with an action step, something that you can do, not just a page full of notes that you took this afternoon, but please go back to your respective companies and the people around you and take some action, some kind of bold action, and be that person to make a change in your organization, in your company. So thank you all for coming today.